All right, well, it's 6 o'clock, and so I promised to get started promptly, and we're gonna get started with a great evening of talking Lake Huron fisheries. So good evening and welcome to our annual spring 2021 Lake Huron Fisheries Workshop Series. Tonight, we take a focus to our nearshore fisheries. We'll be covering some great fisheries of Lake Huron along our coastline, from the Cheneaux Island area fisheries to the St. Mary's River to the Saginaw Bay perch and walleye fisheries that we all love and enjoy. We'll be talking some Cisco restoration opportunities in Lake Huron, as well as some cormorant management updates, and end our evening with some conversations with our DNR fisheries managers covering Lake Huron. So this is a part of an educational series we, Michigan Sea Grant and Michigan State University Extension, host with our partners each spring. So this is the second of a couple of workshops. Last week we had a session focused on the open water fisheries. And so if you want to check that out, we'll drop a link to the recording for that session in the chat of interest. You might want to check out the Lake Huron Michigan Predator Diet Study as an opportunity for you as anglers to contribute as community scientists to that important study. And if after tonight you haven't had enough talk about our Lake Huron fisheries, we're going to collaborate with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources in their DNR Conversation and Coffee next Thursday, May 6th from 6 to 7. And I'd encourage you all to join. It's a great opportunity to continue this conversation. So again, tonight, our focus is on the nearshore fisheries, and I always like to start these workshops with thanks and appreciation to all the partners that collaborate in pulling these Lake Huron fisheries workshops together. It's truly a team effort. We have a great wealth of wisdom from our research and management agencies and universities contributing, including the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Fisheries, the USGS Great Lakes Science Center, who contributed to last week's talks, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, USDA Wildlife Services, the Eagle Office of the Great Lakes, and the Saginaw Bay Reef Partnership, among many others. And we couldn't do these workshops without our important community partners and fishing organizations who have supported these workshops over the years, help us to think about what to bring out to the communities in these workshops, and certainly help to support by promoting and getting folks to attend these workshops. And I need to draw attention to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Lake Huron Citizen Fishery Advisory Committee. On the webinar this evening with us is Frank Christ from the Hammond Bay Area Anglers, who is the chair of this committee, and he's joining us tonight because that committee, those advisors, are also Michigan Sea Grant advisors. They work with us throughout the year to really think about how do we make the best use of these workshops and bring the great information they talk about all year long out to you through these webinars, which are normally hosted in person, but given the times, we're hosting this workshop virtually. So this committee, the conversation tonight, your questions, your input are being gathered by Frank and myself, and we're excited to share this conversation tonight with that advisory committee. And then finally, I want to appreciate my own Sea Grant, Michigan Sea Grant team. So I'm Brandon Schroeder. I serve as an extension educator out of Northeast Michigan and Northern Lake Huron. And I'm proud to be a facilitator tonight and hoping to keep us on task and out on time. We have an action-packed agenda. But I also want to introduce my other Lake Huron Extension colleagues, Megan Goss from the Saginaw Bay region, Elliot Nelson from the Eastern Upper Peninsula, who are helping to facilitate tonight in the background, as well as Mary Bowling, who's an extension educator in Southeast Michigan, covering some of the Southern Lake Huron communities. And of course, our fantastic communication team, including Cindy Hudson in the background, helping to make sure, hopefully this all goes seamlessly tonight. So a little bit about Michigan Sea Grant. Our role is we're a non-regulatory agency. Our role is really to promote Great Lakes science and research and think about how to bring that science and research out in useful ways to our coastal communities through education and outreach. We're a federal program of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, but in Michigan, we're a partnership between Michigan State University and the University of Michigan. And so a lot of the educational programs we do look like this, really thinking about how do we benefit from the research and science around Lake Huron fisheries, and how do we make use of that as anglers and charter boat captains and communities invested in valuing our Great Lakes fisheries. We also, aside from educational workshops like this, provide a wealth of educational materials. Check out our website. We just re-released a 4th edition of the Life of the Lakes, a guide to the Great Lakes fishery. If you're interested in the salmonid family, there's a neat identification guide that you might be interested in checking out, all available on our website, and we'll be posting some of those links in the chat as well. So as an educational program, and because we receive federal funding, I wanted to share this anti-discrimination acknowledgement. And we are really required, but we also make a commitment to ensure that all of our programs and resources are available and accessible to anyone and everyone who might be interested or value or benefit from those resources without discrimination. So appreciate all of our partners and your help to make sure that our resources are shared as widely as folks would like to enjoy them. So with that, I appreciate everybody taking the evening to talk Lake Huron fisheries, and without further ado, I'm going to jump us into our program. We have some amazing nearshore fisheries in Lake Huron, so we did a 3-sided coin toss to see where we should start tonight. And where the winner of that coin toss was the Cheneaux Island area. And so I am going to introduce Dave Fielder, who's a researcher with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, who will be providing that update for us this evening.
This is an update on the status of the yellow perch population and fishery in the Cheneaux Islands, with a lot of special reference to its status relative to what's going on with cormorants in the islands. And we'll also talk about some other species as well. Most people are familiar with where the Cheneaux Islands are, and it's an archipelago along the north shore of Lake Huron, part of the Upper Peninsula. About 26 some islands. The channels and embayments form some very pristine cool water habitat. The centerpiece of the recreational fishery there for many years has been yellow perch. Some of the smaller uninhabited islands have also become important nesting sites for double-crested cormorants that migrate to the Great Lakes for nesting each year. And of course, cormorants are a piscivorous bird, and we've long been tracking that complicated relationship between their predation and the effects on yellow perch and the fishery. Our information tonight comes from a variety of sources. We have an annual fish community assessment netting survey that we perform with 3 key index stations in the Cheneaux Islands. We've been doing that every year since 1969, the first week of October. We even use the same kind of gear. So if we see changes in the catch, that indicates a change in the fish community. Then we have the creel survey, which has been done periodically, and then every year since the year 2000. That's where anglers are interviewed at the end of a fishing trip. We learn about what they were fishing for, what they caught and harvested, how long they fished for, and it also includes an aerial flight that counts the number of boats. And all this comes together to make estimates of harvest and angler catch rate, and then the amount of fishing effort. Lastly is the cormorant monitoring, which is mainly in the form of nest counts that has been performed by different organizations over the years, but over about the last 15 or 18 years, it's been performed by our partners at USDA APHIS Wildlife Services. This has been the trend in cormorant nest numbers in the Cheneaux Islands since about 1980. We can see at their peak around 2002, 2003, they were at about 5,500 nests. So this means at least 11,000 mature breeding birds, probably some more immature birds were also part of that count. And then you can see where management was begun really in 2004 in the forms of culling and nest egg oiling to bring their numbers down. And it worked. It brought their numbers down, and we were tracking and monitoring what the response is in the fish community. And then there was a lawsuit against U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It resulted in a suspension of management there in 2016. Numbers of nesting cormorants started to come back up again. We were able to secure permission to do some partial management at a reduced level, and that leveled off their numbers, but at something about a higher level in 2020. Now, this is the same curve I just showed you here for cormorants, so to help you visualize where we are in terms of trends with other indices. And in this case, this is creel survey information with the angler harvest on this axis here in the blue line, and then the angler catch rate on the red line for this axis over here. Now, the catch rate, again, is the number of yellow perch per hour being harvested. So you can think of it as sort of an expression of quality of fishing. And then, of course, harvest is simply the numbers being harvested. And you can see where we are today relative to the much higher levels back in the 1980s and early 90s. The fishery really bottomed out during this period which was the period of peak cormorant abundance. This blue arrow indicates when cormorant management began, and we can see the recovery, at least of the catch rate, and some improvement in harvest. When you have a higher catch rate and lower harvest, that tells us that overall effort is low. But what's important is what's gone on recently as cormorant numbers have come back up, harvest has stayed low, and the angler catch rate has bounced around some, but most recently it's back down again. This is the average yellow perch catch per unit effort in our survey nets. This is that long-term time series that goes back to 1969 that I mentioned. And we can see how their numbers were lower during the cormorant years. As their numbers came down, the cormorants, we saw some improvement in abundance. More recently, we saw that decline. We saw a little bit of recovery. But what's important and troubling is our most recent value dropped way down. And so we are concerned that we are seeing a response in yellow perch abundance relative to this ongoing sustained higher abundance of cormorants. If we look at just our Hessel station, this is the longest time series for the most consistently surveyed station. We see that the number there has bottomed out almost to zero. Very troubling. We haven't seen that for quite a while. This is the average age of yellow perch, and that's a convenient indicator because when mortality rates are high, basically all that's left are the very youngest perch coming into the system, and we see that reflected here. And we predicted that as cormorant numbers came down, the average age would rebuild up to a higher level, and it did. Now what we see over the last 2 years, it has come way back down again, consistent with the idea that they are enduring a lot of mortality. This is the average length at age 3, both males and females combined, using this as a indicator of abundance. So when they are at the right capacity for the available habitat and prey base, you'll see that their average rate is hung right around the state average. As their numbers, as perch numbers went down, as cormorant numbers went up, the perch growth rate went way up. So the few perch that were surviving were growing very fast. We predicted that as cormorant numbers came down and mortality dropped, that their growth rate would also decline, reflecting an increase in abundance. And that's what it's done most recently. Now here in this case, most recently, it's come back down. So we're getting some mixed messages in some of this data, but You can see that it's been bouncing around some. These error bars up and down are simply the confidence intervals around the average value for the length at age for the yellow perch. This is the total annual mortality rate. You can think of this as the percentage of perch that are dying every year as a result of both harvest, but also natural mortality sources, and that would certainly include predation by a predator like cormorants. And we can see how generally it was higher in the presence of cormorants. This lower period here was actually an artifact of the estimation method. This is done with catch curves, and so it requires an age distribution that reflects the mortality rate. But if mortality rates are great enough across all ages, it will flatten that curve. I think that's what was going on here. But we can see that mortality rates have been as high as 90% in the presence of abundant cormorants. And we predicted that that would come down as cormorant numbers came down, and it did. More recently, it's been climbing back up now. Most lately, it's low again. But again, that could be the flattening of that catch curve as a result of higher predation rates. Now, an alternative explanation to cormorant effects is simply that there's less reproduction or recruitment of yellow perch. So we want to track that. And we do that by looking at the average catch per unit effort in our survey nets of age 2 yellow perch. And that's what these blue bars are. Here again, the confidence intervals for the error bars. When we look at the most recent level, the 2020, we can see that there's a year class in there that's consistent with other year classes. So perch are reproducing. We are getting recruitment. So these other fluctuations we think we see in abundance probably are reflecting mortality. Let's look now at northern pike. Pike have been important in the Lake Cheneaux Islands for a long time, especially recently. Their numbers have really increased as cormorant numbers came down. This has become an important feature of the recreational fishery in the Lake Cheneaux Islands. Most recently now, their numbers are also coming back down, consistent with the idea that there may be increased ongoing predation effects from cormorants. This could also reflect some declining water levels. But given that we're looking here at 2020, 2019, I think this is still kind of a high water era, such that I think that we can't hang that just on water level changes. Brown bullheads are abundant in the Lake Cheneaux Islands, and so they serve as yet one more species to look at. We can see how they are at very low abundance when cormorants were at their peak. They increased in abundance as cormorants came down. More recently, they've come down, they went up, but now they're back down again. So we see some fluctuation there that suggests that at least most recently they're at a lower level. This is the same kind of information, just a different style graphic, but this is for smallmouth bass. We had an enormous catch rate back in 2018, but more recently, 2020, they're back down here. Still a relatively high abundance, but it's been trending lower. So here are some conclusions. Generally, the yellow perch and other notable species are trending in key indicators consistent with excessive predation losses to a predator, consistent with past cormorant effects. Yellow perch abundance is now to a degraded state, reflecting a collapse. Cormorants, we estimate, are consuming 2 million yellow perch per year in 2020, while anglers are taking just about 31,000. So perch are being over-allocated between the two different demands, birds and human uses. Northern pike are compromised and have lost ground from their high abundance in recent years. Brown bullheads are compromised and have lost ground as well. Smallmouth bass appear to be holding their own and remain in good quantity, but they are also on a trajectory towards lower abundance. So while we don't nearly have the number of cormorants that we did at one time, they are at a level that suggests that they're still having a substantial effect on these key fish species in the fish community. And a number of people contribute to this annual work and support our efforts, and so we're grateful to their contributions to be able to have these surveys every year. Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks, Dave. I'm going to move us along. There's some additional questions coming in that we can respond to in type or get back to at the end of the meeting. For now, I'm going to give you a virtual round of applause and move us on we're going to move north to the St. Mary's River. And so Neil Godby, also with the Department of Natural Resources Fisheries Division, works with the St. Mary's River Fisheries Task Group with the Great Lakes Fishery Commission and is agreed to provide a really neat update for us this evening. So thank you, Neil.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present the St. Mary's River Fisheries Task Group update today. There's a lot going on in the St. Mary's River, and this will be a brief overview of some of the issues in the area, as well as ongoing and planned projects by the task group and its member agencies. The St. Mary's River Fisheries Task Group is part of the Great Lakes Fishery Commission's structure and is organized under the Lake Huron Technical Committee. In recognition of the many agencies with jurisdiction over the river, or parts thereof, the group is composed of representatives from U.S. and Canadian federal agencies, state and provincial agencies, and tribal and First Nation resource agencies. Additionally, universities and colleges in the area serve as resource members in the group. We are excited about an ongoing lake sturgeon study in the river, which was initiated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service 2019 with assistance from other project partners, with a set line survey to study the lake sturgeon population of the river. We are planning to expand on the lake sturgeon study starting in 2021, looking at critical habitats and population characteristics through tagging and acoustic telemetry. The project objectives include habitat use by life stage, including adults and subadults, river population abundance, survival by life stage, and composition of the St. Mary's River stock. This project is a collaborative study with agencies providing substantial in-kind contributions, including hydrophone receivers. We are still seeking funding, however, for project implementation in 2022 and beyond. Here's a map of the proposed placement of the hydrophone array for the St. Mary's River Lake Sturgeon study. There are 54 hydrophone locations proposed throughout the river, with hydrophones provided by task group member agencies. We are coordinating this through GLADOS as well. The Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry will also be deploying an array of acoustic receivers in the North Channel and Lake Huron that will extend the coverage of the array planned for the St. Mary's River Sturgeon study. An emerging issue of concern in the St. Mary's River is didymo, or rock snot. Didymo is a stalked diatom that can bloom to nuisance levels. It is brown to white in color, feels like wet wool, and looks like used toilet paper. It was first reported in the main St. Mary's River Rapids in June 2015, which was also the first location it was found in Michigan waters. The picture on the left shows a didymo bloom in the rapids, while on the right is a picture of didymo found in a lamprey trap by Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Didymo is considered to be widespread, but is rare in northern, colder oligotrophic waters. Here are a few more pictures showing didymo in the river and its extensive extracellular stalk production. These stalks can create 2 to 3 foot long mats. On the left is a picture of didymo blooming around a drift net. On the right is an LSSU student holding some near the Little Rapids Bridge, and there's a tub of it at the top. There is a need for didymo research in the St. Mary's River, including surveillance monitoring of the river, tributaries, and Lake Superior shoreline, a better understanding of environmental triggers of blooms, such as dissolved nutrients, nutrient limitation, flow, etc., a need to evaluate the ecological impacts of didymo in the river, A pilot study on the effects on fish spawning and egg survival will start in 2021. Other needs include studying the changes to benthos and nearshore hypoxia issues related to the floating mats. LSSU recently received funding to address some of the research needs and is also working with the Sioux Tribe, Bay Mills Indian Community, and the United States Army Corps of Engineers on a potential project as well. Another area of interest in the St. Mary's River is the Little Rapids. For those unfamiliar with the area, this is one of 4 historic rapids areas in the St. Mary's River. This area is a causeway which previously blocked most of the flow with only 2 6-foot culverts. A bridge, approximately 625 foot long, was installed in the fall of 2016 to restore flow to the historic rapids area as part of the Little Rapids Restoration Project. This project addressed a beneficial use impairment in the St. Mary's River area of concern. As I said previously, this project was completed in November 2016, with short-term monitoring of effects occurring through 2018. The short-term monitoring found an increase in sensitive macroinvertebrate taxa, an increase in cool water lithophilic fish species, an increase in game fish, and an increase in recreational fishing use, which was high. Longer-term monitoring of the ecological response to the restoration project is proposed. We are currently seeking funding to accomplish that monitoring. Another project of interest is being done by USGS, LSSU, and the Army Corps of Engineers as part of an evaluation of recent improvements in operations of the compensating gates. The objectives of the project are to study the larval fish drift and production coming from the St. Mary's River Rapids, see how that larval production relates to river discharge and velocity changes at various gate settings. Field collections so far in the study have found that lake sturgeon spawning and larval drift are occurring in the rapids area, and that larval drift is dominated by rainbow smelt. There is evidence of coragonid spawning and transport. A full field season is planned for 2021. Modeling of hydrology and larval drift is in process. Another part of this study is measuring the extent of exposed riverbed and stranding of fishes after the winter gate closure. The rapids area was surveyed in 2019 and 2020 immediately after the gate closure. Some stranding of forage fish and salmonid eggs and fry were found. The impact is likely dependent, however, on the month or week of closure to avoid active spawning. A proposal for continued study is being developed. Sea lamprey control is continuing in the St. Mary's River. Approximately 312 hectares of high-density larval habitat are scheduled for balicide treatment in 2021. The Root River and possibly the Whitefish Channel will be treated in 2021, pending approval from the Batchewana First Nation. Another survey effort by task group members includes aquatic invasive species, early detection and monitoring. This survey targets juvenile and adult fish new to the Great Lakes. It is an annual survey initiated in 2013 by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Partners include the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and the Sioux Tribe. The good news is that no new invasive species were detected in 2020. A lot of fish, over 5,000, were examined, representing 46 taxa at 69 sites. All sites were sampled by Sioux Tribe in 2020. The map shows locations of round goby and ruff collected in 2020 as part of the survey effort. The red dots show the round goby locations, while the yellow stars show locations where ruff were found. A topic of great interest to many is the construction of a new lock in Sault Ste. Marie by the Army Corps of Engineers to accommodate 1,000-foot ore freighters. Here's a brief update on the status of that project. Dredging of the upstream approach is scheduled to end in 2021, while the construction of the approach walls will start this year. Planning and permitting for Phase 3 is underway, and fisheries concerns are being addressed as part of that process. Major parts of Phase 3 include blasting and dredging in the dry for the new lock, and a bridge and parking deck to the North Power Plant. Based on fisheries comments, the bridge will be clear span, with construction starting in the fall of 2021 or spring of 2022. Here's an overhead view of the Soo locks and surrounding area. Here are the upstream approach and approach walls that I discussed previously, and here's the North Power Plant with the bridge, with the proposed location of the bridge here, going here, and here's the pedestrian bridge, which will be removed. Finally, I'd like to highlight a pair of surveys planned by the task group for 2022, namely the Fish Community Survey and the Whole River Creel Survey. First, the Fish Community Survey. This is a long-term survey series, with the 2022 effort being the 10th in the series that started in 1975. A total of 45 stations or locations will be sampled, with all task group member agencies participating. The survey was last done in 2017 and is planned to be conducted every 5 years in conjunction with the CSMI Year of Intensive Monitoring for Lake Huron. Here's an example of some of the data we gathered during our Fish Community Survey in 2017, using northern pike as an example. As you can see, we track catch per unit effort over time as an indicator of abundance. Northern pike are showing an increasing trend in abundance, likely due to the higher water levels in recent years, providing increased habitat. Age and length distributions are also presented, along with percent maturity by length group. The Whole River Creel Survey is the other survey scheduled for 2022 and is also planned for every 5 years to accompany the Fish Community Survey and the CSMI Year of Intensive Monitoring for Lake Huron. 2022 will be just the third creel survey to cover the whole river, downstream of the compensating works. Previous surveys have shown that the river receives a substantial amount of fishing effort, about 35% or more, compared to all the fishing effort in Michigan waters of Lake Huron. This is an expensive survey, as it requires flights for fishing pressure counts and a minimum of 4 creel clerks, 2 on the Michigan side, 2 on the Ontario side. "24 fish species were recorded in the catch from the St. Mary's River in 2017. Here's information for walleye as an example. Although harvest and harvest rate for walleye are down from the previous estimate, that previous estimate was done a decade earlier and was calculated through extrapolation. Current estimates are within the historical range. We are still seeking funding for this survey and are excited about accomplishing both the Fish Community Survey and Creel Survey in 2022. Again, thank you for the opportunity to provide this update, and with that, I will entertain any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Neil. Much appreciate the time you put into compiling that overview and sharing with us this evening. So a virtual round of applause for everyone tonight. And I will say goodbye to you and reintroduce Dave Fielder to move us down into the Saginaw Bay region to talk walleye and yellow perch. So Dave, welcome back.
Hi, I'm Dave Fielder, and I'm pleased to be able to give you an update about Saginaw Bay walleye and yellow perch this evening. We have a number of different sources of information that we can draw upon to understand what the most current status is of walleye and perch in the bay. We have our annual fish community netting survey that is a combination of gill netting and trawling that dates as far back as the early 1970s. It's been done each year in with the same sort of gear at the same time in early September. And we can use the changes in the catch to help understand the changes in the fish populations. We also have our walleye jaw tagging annual operation that dates back to the early 1980s. That gives us information on mortality rates, exploitation rates, and something about movement. Then there's the creel survey, of course, where we interview anglers at the end of their fishing trip to find out what they caught, how long they fished, and that includes an aerial flight that will count boats, and all that information goes together to allow us to make estimates of how many of each species is harvested and what the catch rate is and the amount of fishing effort as well, all important statistics. There's also reporting from the commercial fishery, and that's especially relevant for yellow perch. And then we have a number of computer models that allows us to put this all together and make estimates of how many walleye we have. And it's really this information collectively that allows us to know what's going on with walleye and yellow perch. This is the trawling catch rate of age 0 walleye. Now, age 0 are like the young of year. It's walleyes that hatched that spring or back when we were stocking that may have survived from stocking. This is about probably a 4-inch fish, maybe, depending on the year, caught in the trawls. And on the y-axis on the left. So this is the average number per 10 minutes of towing. You can see a big change in the amount of reproductive success beginning about 2003. And we attribute that to the decline of alewives in Lake Huron. Alewives began to become scarce and then finally disappeared about that time. And it was really their absence that allowed walleye to reproduce so well. The percentage number on top of each bar is the hatchery fish contribution from when we were stocking. And you can see that that number became very low starting in 2003, meaning that almost all these are wild fish since then. We discontinued stocking in 2006, so that's why it's zeros ever since. The 2020 value there is the most recent, newest value. We can see that it's much lower. This is really our first look at year class strength, if you will, and that suggests that it's less in 2020. But we've been forecasting that for some time because the walleye population has been an all-time high, at least for modern years, and the nature of reproductive success for walleye and yellow perch as well, potentially, is that at high numbers, they actually are going to have less recruitment. It's sort of a compensating mechanism that's built into a lot of fish populations. So we're not surprised that we had some lesser recruitment here in 2020. Now this is year class strength at age 2, as estimated by one of our computer models, our statistical catch at age model. So this is an actual estimate of how many 2-year-olds are out there by year class. And we can see that we've had a number of strong year classes over the last 3 years, but it is coming down, consistent with what we've been expecting. But on the whole, these have been driving higher numbers of walleye in Saginaw Bay. One way we can gauge the abundance of walleye in the bay and where we're at relative to the available prey base and the habitat, kind of collectively the carrying capacity of the bay, if you will, is to look at the growth rate of walleye. And in this case, we're using age 3 as a convenient indicator, and we have both females and males combined for the sake of this graphic. And you can see back before about 2005 or 6 that the mean length in millimeters was much higher than the state average or what our target level had been. And that's consistent with meaning that there was very few walleyes relative to the available prey base and habitat. So they simply grew fast. We predicted that as their numbers came up, their growth rate would go down. And we established a recovery zone We said that once we had 3 out of 5 years in that zone, we've reached our recovery targets, and that happened for the first time there in 2009. Now, since then, it's been creeping back up some, but it's staying right within that zone. So we're still within our range of recovery. And to be clear, it's not that we were actually wanting slower growing walleye, just that we're using this to let the walleye tell us where they are at relative to the capacity of the habitat and the prey base, which means that it's being fully utilized, and that is what we want to have happen. This is trawling again, and this is one of our indices of abundance for prey fish. And this is not numbers of fish, but actually biomass in terms of kilograms per 10-minute tow in the trawling. And you can see for a long time how that's been coming down as walleye abundance has been building. And we were concerned at some points that it was getting so low. What we've been wanting to see is that this would turn the corner and come back up, and we see that happening here in 2020. So this is consistent with the idea that maybe walleye densities are coming down some, although this big increase in 2020 is really just driven by a lot of age 0 white perch. But nevertheless, that constitutes some forage. These are the species down here that make up this particular index. This is the walleye harvest in the recreational fishery dating all the way back to 1986. The blue portion of the bar is the open water harvest, and then the red is the winter harvest, mainly the ice fishery, and the green part there is the harvest by the charter boat industry. We don't have all the information yet for the winter fishery in 2021. This is based on fishing years, so the 2020 would actually be through the March of this year. And so I had to extrapolate that value. So that's a little bit of an estimate there, and we'll update that when we actually get the Creel Survey reporting. But on the whole, it appears that the amount of walleye harvest has come down in 2020 from some otherwise very high numbers. So this is consistent with the idea that the walleye population is in fact getting somewhat smaller. Now this is also some Creel Survey information. This is the harvest rate. So on the y-axis here, this is the number of walleye per hour being reported harvested by anglers. And it's broken out again by the open water fishery, that's the blue bar, and then the red bar is the winter fishery, and then the total combined catch per unit effort is this green value. And we saw that come back down. So this is really a measure, if you will, of how fast you're catching walleyes, and it can be thought of as something of an index of the quality of the fishery. But it's very much attuned to the availability or the abundance of fish. So if they have been coming down some, then we would expect this to decline as it appears to have in 2020. Now this is the amount of effort expressed in angler hours. So this is not catch, this is how many hours collectively fishermen are exerting on the bay. And again, it's broken out between open water, winter, and charter. And we can see that this has been the lowest level in 2020 that we have measured since we've had Creel surveys taking place since 1986. Curious that effort would be so low when we're enjoying such good walleye fishing. But we believe that this is probably tied heavily to the availability of yellow perch, which are still largely depressed in Saginaw Bay in terms of their overall numbers. So that may account for why this is so low. But this is also a phenomenon that we see playing out across the state and really around the country, that outdoor recreation in terms of fishing and hunting generally has been getting less and less participation. So this is not necessarily unique to Saginaw Bay. This is an estimate of all the walleyes out there in Saginaw Bay, age 2 and older. This is another product of our statistical catch at age model. This is again based on fishing years. So this is up through the 2019 year, which would reflect data through March of 2020. So this is about a year old. It will be updated very soon, and I'm largely expecting that it will come down some, but you can see that we're at almost record abundance. The dashed line on either side of this bar is simply the confidence interval, if you will, about our estimate, which is the black line in the middle. And we had almost 2 million new recruits in the 2019 fishing year. Now this is the same information I just showed you, the blue line, age 2 and older, but I broke out just age 4 and older, and that's the line underneath it. And the difference between the two lines are ages 2 and 3-year-old walleye. So we have a lot of young walleye in Saginaw Bay. This is a reflection of all the strong recruitment that we've experienced. And with the liberalized harvest regulations since 2015, we've been looking to dampen and flatten that curve some. And it's not very evident looking at age 2 and up, but when you look at age 4 and older, it does appear that that was somewhat flattened out. Although by the 2019 fishing year, it did increase. And that's simply all these young walleyes at ages 2s and 3s beginning to accumulate. This is a measure of where we are in terms of sustainability of recreational fishery. This is a percent of unfished spawning stock biomass. So this is really just biomass of females, if you will. And we're relating it to what proportion we are if we had no fishing effort whatsoever. We can estimate what that is and then just calculate that proportion. We always want to be above that horizontal red line there. And we can see that in our last estimate of 2019 that it went way up. And that's those recent strong year classes becoming sexually mature. So those females that are recruiting to the population really drove that up. So we're well north of that line, meaning that at least in terms of this index of sustainability, we're in good shape. This is an examination of the total mortality rate. And you can think of this as the percentage of walleyes being removed from the population by all forms, not just harvest, but natural mortality sources also. And we have really two measures here. We have that based on our annual jaw tagging, that's the red line, and then also estimated by our catch at age model, that's the blue line. And these error bars up and down just show us the confidence interval with it. We believe the true value to be somewhere in that range. We don't have the estimate from the catch at age model for the most recent years. That always runs a year behind. But we can see how the two estimates, these are independent estimates of the same thing, compare. And the important thing is that it says that total annual mortality is somewhere just a little less than 50% down to maybe about 32%. Either one of those are sustainable for a healthy walleye population. So this is another measure of sustainability, and it suggests that at the moment we're okay. Now this is exploitation rate, again measured two different ways. The top one is from our jaw tagging tag returns, and the bottom value is from our catch at age model. And while the two estimates differ slightly, they are actually pretty similar, and it suggests to us that the true exploitation rate, which again is like the proportion of walleyes being harvested from the population, is probably less than 13%. So that's entirely sustainable for a walleye population. This is shifting now to yellow perch. And back to the trawling information. This is the catch rate of young and older yellow perch in 10-minute tows. So the yellow bar is the age 0, or the young of years, we sometimes call it. And the purple bar is age 1 and older yellow perch. And so for a long time there, through the 70s and 80s and early 90s, we had both, as you would expect, because it's, after all, it's the purple part of the bar that anglers and commercial fishers are interested in. But you got to have some of those yellow bars to represent the younger fish coming up. And we had a lull in both in the 90s. That was about the time that Dreissenid mussels, like zebra mussels, were colonizing. But just like with walleye, when alewives disappeared from the system, the reproductive success of yellow perch exploded. And it has been very high ever since. So that's good. We're getting lots and lots of yellow perch reproduction, but we're not seeing very much in terms of those yearling and older perch, the purple part of the bars, in recent years. That suggests to us that most of our young perch are dying somewhere between age 0 and age 1. Well, that's too early to be explained by either the recreational or the commercial fishery. This is natural mortality. So in a way now, the predator-prey dynamics of Saginaw Bay has shifted such that yellow perch have really become a forage fish. And the predation rates apparently are so high that it's preventing us from getting the recruitment we need to have a really quality fishing yellow perch population. So that's part of the motivation for having the liberalized harvest regulations around walleye in recent years, was that if maybe the walleye numbers could come down, that survival of young perch could go up, because we know that walleye feed heavily on these young yellow perch, but so do other predators. We see them in the stomach contents of just about all the predators that we examine. So it's not only walleye, but walleye are probably the most abundant top predator out there in the bay. These are Creel Survey statistics now specific to yellow perch, and the bluish, or maybe that's a teal color there, that's the catch per unit effort, the number of yellow perch per hour on the right-hand y-axis, and the green is the actual numbers being harvested on the left y-axis. And we can see how that has been trending down for some time. Occasionally the catch rate will improve, but the overall harvest numbers are at very low levels when you compare them to where it had been in the past. Now again, this information is about a year old, and we are hearing reports of much improved yellow perch fishing this spring. So we're hopeful that if, in fact, walleye numbers have come down the way we suspect, that maybe we're seeing a response in the yellow perch population and fishery. We can't tell just yet from this data, but these are the kinds of measurements that we're going to be looking for to see if there is, in fact, some improvement. This is the growth rate of yellow perch. Again, we're using age 3 as an indicator. You can see where they are relative to the state average. So they're growing very fast. And that's the silver lining to their low abundance, is that we see some really nice big yellow perch out there. There just aren't enough of them. Really having a fast growth rate like this indicates a problem overall. Now we can see with the most recent information that growth rate has come down, and that's an early indication that maybe their numbers are coming back up. So again, we're going to be watching this closely, but this is more hopeful. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of where we are with walleye and yellow perch. And after we're able to update our models later this spring or early summer, we'll have some new reads on where we are at, and we'll see if in fact that we are getting some improvements in the yellow perch population and fishery. That's what we're hoping for, and we'll look forward to reporting back to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, for that fantastic update on our Saginaw Bay perch and walleye fishery. Much appreciated. So next we'll turn our attention to Cisco restoration in Lake Huron, which has been a long talked about opportunity for our Lake Huron fisheries as an ecosystem restoration opportunity. And so next I welcome Kevin McDonald from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who is joining us this evening to share an update on those current restoration efforts ongoing in Lake Huron. So Kevin, welcome.
Hello, my name is Kevin McDonald. I'm a fisheries biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service based out of the Alpena Conservation Office. Today I'm excited to be sharing some updates and some progress on an effort that our office has been a part of to restore Cisco to the southern parts of Lake Huron. This project has been the result of a lot of work from a lot of different agencies that have all been coordinating and working through the Lake Huron Technical Committee. So before moving forward, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge all the work that our hatchery programs and staff in the Alpena office have done, along with all of our project partners. This truly is a collaborative effort, and it just wouldn't be possible without the cooperation of each agency or tribe that you can see here at the bottom of the screen. So to begin, I'd like to start with a brief history of Cisco and Lake Huron. As many folks probably know, prior to the mid-20th century, Cisco were the most abundant pelagic fish in Lake Huron. In fact, we can look back to a source dating back to 1929, said that Cisco would be found, quote, out of virtually every port in Lake Huron in the North Channel and Georgian Bay. So historically, spawning aggregations were concentrated in just several hotspots, including Thunder Bay, the northern portion of the lake, stretching from the Lake Cheneaux Islands all the way into the North Channel. The Bruce Peninsula, both in the Georgian Bay and in the Main Peninsula. And then lastly, Saginaw Bay, which is going to be the focus of the rest of this talk, is the spawning aggregations that used to occur there. So between the 1940s and 1970s is when we really see the Cisco decline from being the most abundant pelagic fish in Lake Huron down to just being a minor component of the Lake Huron fish community. And there were several causes for this, and a few listed here are just the introduction of alewife and rainbow smelt, overfishing, and then water quality issues and habitat loss. And so on this figure, I show the lake-wide, so this includes US and Canada, commercial landings going back to the early 1900s. And you can see right in the 1940s when we see that sharp decline in landings. And one thing I'd like to point out is that historically, the Saginaw Bay population provided some of the largest landings for the commercial fishery. And so that's one reason why we've taken an interest in restoring Cisco into Saginaw Bay. So that was historically. Currently, where are the fish? And currently they are concentrated into the northern part of the main basin, starting from the Lake Cheneaux Islands all the way over to Drummond Island, the North Channel, and Georgian Bay. So currently there is no known population in the main basin or Saginaw Bay. So the lack of fish in the main basin in Saginaw Bay, or I should say of Cisco, is one of the reasons that the Lake Huron Technical Committee developed these fish community objectives for Corgonans in Lake Huron. And so the first objective that was identified was to maintain the present diversity of those fish. The second was to manage lake whitefish and Ciscos at levels that are capable of sustaining annual harvests of 3.8 million kilograms. And the third one here, which is important for the rest of the talk, is to restore Cisco to a significant level and, where possible, protect the rare deepwater Ciscos. And so we decided to begin this reintroduction process in Saginaw Bay with hopes that this reintroducing fish in Saginaw Bay, they would eventually spread to the main basin of Lake Huron. So, why is it important to recover Cisco in Lake Huron? The first is, Cisco's, as I documented, they historically were an important commercial fishery, and we think that, they could provide an important component for commercial and recreational fisheries in the future. Predatory fish in Lake Huron would definitely benefit from additional prey source, especially a prey source that is low in thiaminase, which can have negative effects for lake trout and lake trout ability to reproduce. They can hopefully provide a pelagic buffer for yellow perch populations, and really they differ from other pelagic prey fish, and they occupy a slightly different niche, and so and that niche is more in line with the historic fish community. So we're hoping that we're able to reintroduce that or fill that niche once again. And Cisco, because of their spawning patterns, coming into shore to spawn or coming in shallow to spawn, they're able to connect nearshore and offshore food webs during that process pretty well. And currently, the lower trophic levels in Lake Huron look a lot like Superior, and we see Cisco thriving there. So we think the conditions are right for a reintroduction, and that really they have a good opportunity to be successful. So next I'd like to just look at how the stocking and reintroduction study is actually functioning. And so the goal that we came up with was to stock 1 million fingerlings annually for a minimum of 10 years. And so we're actually splitting those cohorts between spring and fall releases to evaluate how season and body size might affect the relative performance or survival of these stocked fish. And so we actually collected our brood stock from the northern Lake Huron populations of Cisco that do exist in the Cheneaux Islands and on Drummond Island. And so we collected those fish and gametes from those fish and actually reared them in the Jordan River National Fish Hatchery. And so currently this effort began in 2017 and continued into last year. And so currently we have four lines of brood stock at that facility that we can use into the future to provide stocked fish. But once those fish are reared and ready to go, they get then transferred from the Jordan River Fish Hatchery, and then we're stocking them into Lake Huron. And so all fish that are being stocked, I should also mention, will have a OTC mark, or which I'll talk about in just a bit. But essentially, this is a way for us to identify hatchery fish. And this is a great way to mark fish that are just too small for traditional methods like pit tags or floy tags or even fin clips. We're talking about some pretty small fish. So stocking events, as I mentioned, they occur in the fall and spring, and we also divided our stocking into nearshore and offshore events. So we did some shore stocking, and then we also used our research vessel, the Baird, to do offshore stocking in Saginaw Bay. And so all the stocking happened there either from the shore near Tawas or just off shore there as well. And so what does that look like? So to date, we've done pretty good in terms of meeting our goals, our stocking goals. So here on the left side of the slide, you can see the size of fish, the two different sizes of fish that get stocked. And so on the smaller fish would be a spring release fish, and the larger fish there in the palms would be an example of a fall released fish. And so, and then on the graph, you can just see starting in 2018, how many fish have been stocked each year. And so I should note in 2020, you'll notice those asterisks above those bars, and that's just to indicate that in those years, we only were able to do shore stocking due to restrictions with COVID. However, in 2021, we are planning on stocking, and hopefully we'll be able to do both shore and continue on our offshore stocking to evaluate how those strategies affect survival rates. So I mentioned that we're using OTC, or oxytetracycline. And so this is a great technique, as I mentioned, to put a mark on very small fish. And it's a non-invasive way to mark fish as well. And so this chemical leaves a fluorescent mark on hard structures in the fish, so actually in their bones and otoliths and other structures such as that. And what's great is it's introduced to the fish through their feed, just in the hatchery prior to release. And so the goal here is if we recapture a fish, we're able to pull their vertebrae from that fish, and you put it under a fluorescent light, and then it absorbs that light, and then it will actually fluoresce on its own. And we were able to mark fish both in the spring and fall. And so in the spring, those fish received a single treatment of OTC, and in fall fish, they received 2 treatments of OTC. And so when we get these structures and we fluoresce them, we're actually able to tell if it was a spring release fish or a fall release fish. And so that's how we'll be able to evaluate how effective a spring release is versus a fall release, assuming that we're able to get these fish back. And so on the bottom of the slide, you can see examples of what a single mark versus a double mark there looks like. And hopefully you can kind of tease apart the difference there. With the fall release, you can see kind of 2 halos on each vertebrae versus the spring release where you only see a single mark. So after fish get put in the lake or stocked in the lake, the next question then becomes, how are they doing? Are they surviving? Are they growing? And are they reproducing? And so to evaluate if stocked fish are producing wild fish in the bay, we have, starting in 2017, have begun larval surveys in Saginaw Bay. And so these surveys involve dragging a larval net known as a Newston net behind a boat and running transects throughout the bay. And you can see on the map here, each one of those dots is a survey point. The goal here is to document recruitment if it is indeed happening. And so the 2018 year class, which was the first stocked year class, is now of spawning age. And so this year might be the first year that we actually are able to document successful spawning in Saginaw Bay. So far, those surveys have just started and are continuing now, and hopefully we'll have some results soon. So moving on to juveniles, we utilize 2 different surveys to look for juvenile fish and those include beach seines and small boat bottom trawls. And so on the map here, you can see the red dots actually represent the locations that we're going to and able to successfully beach seine. And so the idea here is, similarly, we're looking to document recruitment in case our larval sampling isn't able to find fish. Hopefully this is just another way to capture fish and understand if they are growing to this level. And so these surveys typically happen into May and June. And then adult surveys, we have a lot of different surveys that help us get a hold of any adults that we encounter in Saginaw Bay. Those include midwater trawls, and those are done through a bunch of agencies, USGS, Fish and Wildlife Service, and Michigan DNR, and as well as bottom trawl surveys in the deeper parts of Saginaw Bay by USGS. And then Michigan DNR also has a gillnet survey that they do each year. And then as well as looking at the stomach contents from their lake trout survey. So we're able, if we find that lake trout are in fact eating Cisco, again, we'll be able to know or hopefully find fish in lake trout stomachs as well. And so the last survey that we do is a fall gill netting survey looking for spawning fish to document if stocked fish are indeed spawning. And so this year will actually be the first year that we're able to do that survey because as I mentioned, this is about the first year that we expect fish to start spawning in mass. So the goal here is to head back to where they were stocked and put some gill nets and see if we can find some spawning fish. And if hopefully we're able to document spawning there and then as well as some other locations as well. And so hopefully I've conveyed, we are looking for almost every life stage of Cisco and Saginaw Bay to hopefully document, both how well the hatchery fish are surviving and then, are they actually contributing to the population through successful spawning and recruitment. So looking forward, what's next for this project? So as I mentioned, we have 4 lines of broodstock at the Jordan River National Fish Hatchery. And so we don't need to do any more gamete collections up at the Cheneaux Islands and Drummond Island until 2023. And that's just to replenish the broodstocks and make sure that we're capturing the correct genetic diversity that's necessary. But that's great news because having those broodstocks available is just a more reliable egg source than having to go up to the or go capture gametes in the wild every year. So we're excited to have that. So today I kind of went over the project overview, and so the question becomes, well, how well are the fish doing? Well, to date, we've only seen a handful of Cisco that have been encountered in Saginaw Bay. I believe the largest amount were encountered by a bait fisherman who got some small silvery fish in his catch and let us know. But we're anticipating some bigger catches here coming up, especially as the fish grow and mature and become more susceptible to especially our adult surveys. And another thing that we have in the works is a lot of telemetry studies. Hopefully we'll be able to put acoustic tags in fish and be able to track them through the lake and understand where they go, especially after stocking. And then as well as where did the adults go after after stocking and when they grow. So stay tuned. We'll have some more information with that coming up. So lastly, I'd like to ask for your help. So some of you may have already seen our Cisco wanted posters around boat launches throughout the state. So if you do encounter a Cisco during your work or recreation, we ask that you remove that tail and wrap it in tinfoil or put it in a black bag and then return it to either the DNR office in Bay City or Alpena or the Alpena U.S. Fish and Wildlife office. that'd be a great help to us. That's more information. And if you turn in a fish, we can definitely keep you in the loop and let you know what we find out. So with that, hopefully I've left enough time to take some questions. If we don't get to your question, my email is on the slide. Feel free to get in touch. And thank you for your time. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for that amazing update and overview of Cisco restoration in Lake Huron, a super exciting effort led by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, among the many other partners that you referenced. So now we'll turn our attention to another nearshore topic of interest across Lake Huron, and that's that of cormorant management. And Tony Aderman from the USDA Wildlife Services has traditionally provided a cormorant management update for Lake Huron, and he is unable to join us this evening, but has recorded a presentation that we'd like to share, and we'll pass any questions to Randy Claremont or Dave Fielder from the Department of Natural Resources, who have also been involved in those update efforts. So without further ado, I'll pass the update over to Tony.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tony Aderman with USDA Wildlife Services, and I'm here to provide you with the 2020 Wildlife Services double-crested cormorant update from our management activities in 2020. Well, first, I want to start off with just kind of giving everybody a little bit of a reminder of kind of who is what and what agencies are involved with this cormorant management. Excuse me. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are pretty much responsible for providing permits for migratory birds, which cormorants are. So Region 3 out of Minneapolis sets us up with the opportunity for permits in order to do cormorant management. With that, Michigan DNR has applied for a permit and was accepted, and now will be a sub-permittee under the Michigan DNR in order to do our management activities like we have in the past. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was kind of familiar with the different agencies and who is involved and what their role is. That's kind of just a general overview. So getting started, here's a map of the Lake Cheneaux Islands. Down in the bottom lower left corner, Green Island, which is just west of the Mackinac Bridge. St. Martin Shoal. Fossil Shoal is underwater and is no longer visible. Goose Island, Crow Island, and Little Saddlebag Island. Little Saddlebag Island has not had cormorants nesting on it in several years. Crow Island still does, even though there's not much real estate left. The cormorants do still nest there. They still nest on Goose Island. Goose Island is kind of a long linear island, about probably 25 acres, very well treed, so there's primarily all tree nesters on Goose Island. St. Martin's is treeless and mostly ground nesters there, and Green Island is pretty much all treed with tree nesters there. Just want to show a graph from basically when we started. We actually started in 2004 with management activities in the Lake Cheneaux. And as you can see, all the little bitty colored lines there are Crow Island and Saddlebag, Green Island Shoal, St. Martin's, Winograd, Goose Island. And as I just mentioned, the only ones that are still active are Goose Island, St. Martin's, and basically Green Island and Crow Island. As you can see, we were able to bring the numbers down fairly quick early on, and we kind of got hung up around 800 to 900, which 2012 was a little bit of an odd year for whatever reason. I can't explain that, but our goal was to get it down to 500, and we really struggled, as you can see, going into 14 and 15, and then in 2016, the PRDO, which the previous order that we worked under to do management was vacated, and we were no longer able to do cormorant management in 2016 and 17. The numbers did creep back up a little bit. By 18, we were able to do management, but we pretty much looked at it as like a 50% take. We were able to achieve that, but that's what we had kind of done in the past. And as I mentioned, we weren't able to really bring those numbers down any. We would just kind of plateau around that 900, and we're starting to do it again in 19, and then in 2020. But in 2020, we made some changes that I'm about to show you. But before I get to 2020, I just kind of want to show you what we did in 2019, just kind of as a reference. So island locations that I mentioned, nests oiled, birds removed. Essentially, if you look at the bottom two lines there, the nests oiled were 695. The peak nest count was 1462, as you just seen in the previous slide, and our take was 1145, which is about 39%. So we were a little bit under 50%. In 2020, a little bit of a change. The overall peak nest numbers were about the same as in 2019, but we did a kind of a different approach with the help of the Michigan DNR. It's called the consumptive index approach. And I'm not going to try to explain that because I can't knowledgeably do that. But Randy Claremont with Michigan Fisheries, Michigan DNR Fisheries Division, or Dave Fielder could do a much better job of that. So that would be a much better question to talk to them. But with using this approach, you can see we almost took 60% in 2020. And that's what we planned to do back in 2016 before the PRDO was vacated, was to really increase the take. Dave Fielder had an equation set up and we were going to do that, but it was vacated and we were never able to do it. So I'm showing this slide again. We were able to do it in 2020, and my prediction is going into 2021 here, our peak nest count is hopefully quite a bit lower than it was in the past 4 years. So we're going to see what that'll look like going into 2021 with a 60% take. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, but my prediction is that it will be lower. But there are several factors that, influence that. So in 2021, our plans for the Lake Cheneaux are pretty much the same. We need to gather nest counts from all the locations, and that's a peak nest count number, so we know what to do as far as management and where to do it. We'll oil all available nests, and I say available nests, as I mentioned earlier. Really the only available nests anymore are on St. Martin Shoal, Green Island, Goose Island, possibly Crow Island. There may be some because that's pretty much treeless, but Goose and Green Island are tree nesters, and they're just not available. So our availability to oil nests, cormorant nests, are pretty limited in the Lake Cheneaux. We'll continue to call adults with shotguns, and we will, in 2021, use the consumptive index approach again that was developed by Michigan DNR. One thing that's kind of changed for us also in the past several years is the lake levels, and what it's kind of done with cormorants, how it's kind of shifted them around and moved them around and changed their habits. I'm kind of curious to see what the lake levels are this year and what kind of effect that may or may not have on the cormorants in the Lake Cheneaux. I also add that's pretty much my update for Cedarville. It's pretty short. It's pretty quick. That's pretty much all the information I have. But I also like to let everybody know kind of what else we're doing out there, or what we have been doing out there. So in the rest of Michigan, Bay to Knock, we've done some management work there in the past couple years, as you'll see. Beaver Island a little bit. Obviously, I just mentioned the Lake Cheneaux. We've never missed basically a year there except for 16 and 17 when we weren't able to because there was no depredation orders to work under. Thunder Bay, Saginaw Bay, and back over to Lake Michigan and Ludington. Jumping back to 2019, we really only did management in Round Island and Big Bay to Knock. Round Island's one of the bigger cormorant colonies there that we have access to work on. As you can see, the nest numbers were 1481, and we took 50% that year, 1,481 adults. We oiled a few nests. We did get a rough estimate nest count over in Whiskey Island in the beavers, but we did not do any management. Just didn't allow for it to work out that year, so we did not do any management in the beavers. In 2020, so Round Island, the nest count numbers, they jumped up a little bit for whatever reason, up to 1591, just right at 1600. But we use a consumptive index approach there as well as far as our management take, and we took right at 66%. So I'm really curious, along with the Lake Cheneaux, to see what happens with Round Island and Big Bay to Knock, using that a little bit more aggressive approach as far as take. We did the same thing, as you can see, in Whiskey Island. Nest numbers were up just a little bit from our previous 2019 estimate, and we took about 65%, again, using the consumptive index approach. So kind of curious to see where those nest numbers are going to come in at those two locations as well for 2021. Here's just kind of another little way to look at nest numbers across the board. From this actually includes Thunder Bay, Lake Cheneaux, Beaver Island, Bay to Knock. The problem with this is early on in the 2006, 2008. By 2008, we were doing management at all these locations. So that's really kind of the true peak nest number for all the locations I just mentioned. But as time went on, we had less success with accurate nest counts and good available nest data. So a lot of this in 2018, 19, and even 2020 is a little bit skewed because we don't have really good nest data information, or we did not, or we were not able to acquire it. I want to change that in 2021 and moving forward so we can really see what's going on. But with that being said, I predict these numbers are not really too much higher than what's here, just based on what I've seen out there. But again, I don't have the actual nest count data to back it up. So moving forward kind of for the rest of the state, for Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, in Bays to Knock, we will try to get a pretty comprehensive nest count at all cormorant nest locations and continue with management where we can. Same for beaver, nest counts at all the colonies, the cormorant colonies out there, and conduct management where we can, mostly through calling adults with shotguns with non-toxic shot. Lake Cheneaux continue the same nest count and management. Thunder Bay, do a nest count, and I say management based on the nest count. Actually, the last couple of years, the nest count in Thunder Bay have been at management goal or below, so we have not done anything management-wise there. Just curious to see what happens this year in 2021. A lot of that, I believe, had to do with not only our management over the years, but then as of the last couple of years, the higher lake levels, really, the cormorants lost a lot of real estate on their typical or historic nesting areas out there. So that really changed things out there. Flooding pump storage, that's the man-made break wall. We'll do nest counts and management out there. And possibly in the Cheneaux Islands and CDF Island, we'll do, if nothing else, we'll do nest counts for this year. It's pretty much the end of the presentation. I apologize to everybody. I will not be here to take questions this Thursday night. But with that being said, Brandon will leave this slide up on for a little bit. My contact information is there, my email, my direct line at the office, and my cell phone number. Please call those with any questions that you may have. I've also asked Dave Fielder and Randy Claremont if you do have questions, they may be able to answer them. They're quite familiar with the Cormorant management and what's been going on for all these years. But if there's another question that they're not able to answer, please feel free to reach out to me at any one of those contacts below, and I will get back to you with an answer as soon as possible. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Well, thanks, Tony, for taking the time to record and share that update related to cormorant management in Lake Huron. We much appreciate. Thank you. And now as we round out our evening, it's been an action-packed evening, and I'm excited to turn our attention to the management updates related to our nearshore fisheries of Lake Huron. And I'd like to introduce Randy Claremont, who's the Lake Huron Basin Coordinator, as well as Jeff Jolly, who is recorded and will share some updates specific to Saginaw Bay fisheries management. So we'll start by sharing the recorded updates from Jeff and then turn our attention back to Randy to round out our evening. Thank you.
Hello and good evening. Today I'll briefly share with you a few DNR items for the Lake Huron Nearshore update for the Sea Grant workshop. I'm not able to attend tonight, so I've recorded my update, and my colleagues can help field any questions this might generate. Here's a quick snapshot showing our two units. So I'm Jeff Jolly, the unit supervisor for the Southern Lake Huron unit, and Dave Borgeson is the unit manager for the Northern unit. Addie Dutton and Jason Gosto are the biologists for the Southern unit, while Neil Godby and Tim Solinsky are the biologists for the Northern unit. I won't take up too much time, but I wanted to touch on three topics in this update. The Saginaw Bay Walleye and Yellow Perch Work Group, lake sturgeon reintroductions, and the Tittabawassee Dam failures. Last fall, we formed a constituent-based work group to discuss a vision for the fishery of Saginaw Bay and Basin. This work group was formed after discussions with the Lake Huron Citizens Fishery Advisor meeting revealed that an overall discussion of goals and objectives for the Bay was long overdue. So our vision was as follows: to develop an angler-driven vision for the present and future Saginaw Basin, that is, bays and rivers, walleye and yellow perch recreational fishery to incorporate into Michigan DNR management processes and decisions. Our great partners at the Michigan Sea Grant, namely Megan Goss and Brandon Schroeder, were the facilitators of this group, and we put together a roadmap of the process. We formed the work group with a variety of folks representing various recreational angling interests, like walleye fishing or members of walleye clubs, also sort of folks associated with charter industry or even retail businesses, and also wanted to make sure we captured a diversity of folks in terms of geography up and down and around the bay representing various areas. We held 4 virtual meetings where we discussed items like valuing and visioning, goals and sustainability, and priorities and trade-offs. We developed a survey to be administered to a random sample from the Michigan DNR Angler database, and we piloted the survey through the Citizens Fishery Advisory Group. And the purpose of this survey is to even capture more information about values and priorities for the Bay. And the survey will launch very shortly, probably within a week. After we complete and process the survey, we, the DNR, will compile a report outlining the results of our workgroup process, as well as a new management plan for the Saginaw Bay and associated connecting rivers. The plan will be vetted through various constituent groups and reviewed internally. And we're really hoping we can come up with a high quality product and have good buy-in from our partners so we can periodically go back to the plan and check in on how we are doing in the Bay and that our goals and values still match those that we identified in the plan. The end result would be completion of the plan in time to submit new potential regulation changes in order to go through the normal DNR review and vetting process. Here are some of the highlights from the work group process thus far. Some of the things that were identified as of high value. One was a resilient fishery that can bounce back and withstand change. The folks on the work group very much appreciated the state of the fishery as it is right now, very high quality Saginaw Bay walleye fishery. Folks really appreciated a diverse fish community and the fishing opportunities that might bring, whether it's diversity of types of fish, beyond walleye and yellow perch, especially in the outer bay, you get into some of the salmonids, as well as opportunities, different ways in which you may use the bay and rivers for fishing and different techniques you might use. People placed a high value on native species recovery and restoration, and also high value on habitat restoration and water quality. It was very easily understood and recognized that you can't have a high quality fish population if you don't have the habitat and water quality to go with it. A couple of other notes. In terms of risk, there was caution about taking risks related to the fishery, and folks really preferred calculated decision making. I think this stems from the fact that there was a time, and people remember it, when the walleye fishery and the fishery of the bay was not in good shape. And now, currently, the walleye population is doing great, and people value that, think that's something to be careful with and something to be respected. Also, some frustration expressed, especially with the yellow perch fishery. This used to be such a popular fishery and high quality. It's really declined over the years, largely due to a very abundant walleye population. We think the predation on those juvenile perch is really suppressing that population. So there's frustration there, but also, recognition that it's a challenging management situation. So moving on to the Lake Sturgeon Reintroduction Program, that began 4 years ago, and it was paused last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic, meaning we didn't stock any fish last year. Prior to that, we were targeting to stock over 1,000 lake sturgeon in the Saginaw River system, and our intent is to continue that stocking this year. We've been getting angle reports the last several years of the sturgeon being incidentally caught in the lower Saginaw River and out in the bay by ice fishers. And we're hoping that this is an indication that we have good survival of these stocked fish. Efforts are also underway to acquire funding for a telemetry study that would help us understand how well the fish are surviving and where they might go after stocking. And finally, I just wanted to touch briefly on the issue of the Tittabawassee Dam failures, which happened last May, after our Sea Grant workshops had concluded. And I'll just cover a few questions that we've commonly received. So I'm sure that most of you remember both the Sanford Dam, which impounded Sanford Reservoir, and Wixom Reservoir, which was impounded by Edenville Dam, both breached and failed last May. Here's Edenville Dam on the Tittabawassee. Here's Sanford Dam on the Tittabawassee. The Tittabawassee flows down through Midland, down here by the National Wildlife Refuge, where it becomes the Saginaw River. The communities of Sanford and Midland immediately downstream suffered great damage. Further downstream, the Shiawassee National Wildlife Refuge, where the Flint River, the Cass, the Shiawassee, and Tittabawassee mostly meet, that took the blunt of the flooding downriver, and it likely reduced and prevented further flooding damage to Saginaw and Bay City. So the wetland complex there at that confluence really displayed its value, which we call ecosystem services, in buffering the negative effects of those floodwaters. You might be aware that the river just below Dow Dam is one of the most important walleye spawning areas for the Saginaw Bay walleye population. Our observations thus far are that the habitat there remains intact and in good shape. And walleye spawning occurred there again this year. We were able to tag 1,000 fish in about a week's time as part of our angler harvest monitoring program, just like in previous years. We also think that the 2020 young of the year walleye should have been mostly out of the river by the time the flood occurred. The walleye spawned in March, so their progeny should have been hatched and mostly moved downriver and out of the bay. If anything, the flood might have goosed them out into the bay a bit quicker. Other notes, the dowel ponds were not compromised in the flooding. Everything stayed contained, and the way that system of ponds is engineered to contain potential hazardous substances worked as designed. And then the larger impact of increased sedimentation are unknown. As I mentioned, the spawning habitat below Dow Dam looked good and intact, and I think some preliminary observations out in the bay of Cormorant Reef don't really show that that's being sedimented in at this time either. Issues that are being monitoring include ongoing active erosion up in the basin, and also the potential for sea lamprey to colonize and spawn in many new areas of the Tittabawassee that were formerly blocked by the dams. A multi-agency work group has been formed to monitor this situation and understand the implications that increased sea lamprey production might have for the control program and also for the Bay and Lake Huron's fisheries. And with that, I'll conclude. Here's our contact information. Sending emails right now is probably a better way because we're all working from our home offices, but calling these numbers will eventually get you to us as well. Thanks for your attention. Bye-bye.
All right, appreciating that update from Jeff, and I'm going to turn the mic back over to Randy Claremont as the basin coordinator.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brandon. And I guess given the amount of time we have left, which according to my clock is we're at our time, I think Jeff covered the updates well. So I would just open it up to questions. And I know one of the questions I wanted to address, it was on cormorants, and specifically talked about some of the Caspian terns and other avian species that can act as predators on fish, and how are we treating those relative to cormorants? And I think a couple of things to point out, and one is, this is where some of our non-lethal harassment techniques are effective for not only cormorants, but a variety of other species, especially at fish stocking sites where the stocked fish are concentrated, and it just creates a unique environment for the birds and the fish to interact. So harassment techniques, and we've seen this with a lot of our stockings. Oftentimes the gulls are the first to notice and show up, and we'll try to get the fish before they start to move to deeper water. And that actually is a signal to the cormorants to move on in. So I think the strategy, again, is to use both non-lethal and lethal techniques when possible. And with cormorant population, just given their numbers and the idea behind this new permit system is it's to alleviate conflicts. And the conflicts that I hear about from the management standpoint are always fisheries and cormorants, and very seldom do I hear any other bird species mentioned, and they're not covered under this permit system for lethal take. So good question. And are there other, like I said, I'd rather look at some of the other questions, but I don't know if there's any other ones that are still open, or do they all get answered online, Brandon?
Yeah, there was a lot of great answers, and just some appreciation for all of our panelists and presenters for typing away. I think two that stood out that I wanted to address live one was regarding the trends of Atlantic salmon numbers in the fishery. And I saw there was a reference to last week's presentation where that was addressed. So check out the recording. And then the other question, there was several questions actually that related to your plans or thinking about walleye size and creel limits, given Dave's presentation.
Yeah, and so let me address both those. With the Atlantic salmon, yeah, the presentation's online that really covers some of the trends in catch and effort in stocking. I will say we've had a project funded in support from the Blue Water anglers and Michigan State University and MDNR to look at Atlantic salmon fishery trends at a deeper level. So we actually have some preliminary stock assessment estimates We talk about 100,000 Atlantic salmon every year, but how many survive each age class, and cumulatively, how many do we have in Lake Huron? And Matt Zink, the graduate student there, has a preliminary estimate of about 500,000 Atlantic salmon in Lake Huron at any point in time. So some information coming out from Matt pretty soon in that project. Won't be covering the presentation, but we'll be sharing that as we get more detail down the road. The other question just about regulations, it's a great example to, come next week. We are considering all kinds of regulations across Lake Huron. These bays and nearshore areas, because of the decline in nutrients in the open water, have become huge drivers in the fishery, both in terms of fish recruitment, catch effort, as you saw referenced by Neil in the St. Mary's River, 30 to 35% of our total angler effort, similar trends in Saginaw Bay. So these bays and nearshore areas are so critical. And because we don't stock a lot of fish in them, a lot of them are the nearshore species, walleye and pike and bass, we really manage them through regulations. So those regulations become even more important. We put a lot of science and monitoring and thinking behind it, but we also need feedback from anglers and stakeholders in terms of the effectiveness of the regulations from both the biological and social side. We'll get into that in more depth next week. We'll have a lot fewer presentations, although the talks were great today, but we'll be able to actually field more regulatory questions, both for walleye and perch in Saginaw Bay, but all of Lake Huron and inland waters included.
Thanks, Randy, and appreciate the pitch for next week. Again, it's been awesome to have 3 Thursdays in a row talking Lake Huron fisheries. The only questions I see remaining are not questions, but rather appreciation for all of our speakers and panelists who contributed content this evening. So, Randy, I'm going to thank you and your team and the rest of our presenters for all.
And Michigan Sea Grant, you, Brandon, and your staff do a great job facilitating these. I'm not even sure how you do this magic behind the scenes, but you make it seem very seamless. So we appreciate that.
Well, thanks, Randy, and appreciation to everybody hanging on as participants. Again, we would love and hope to in the future do these workshops out in our coastal communities in person, but given the times, this virtual format is what we have, and we appreciate everybody showing up to have this conversation. I'm going to round us out by saying this workshop has been recorded, and we'll be providing some post-workshop communications that will provide the links to the recordings for this week and as well as last week, and many of the resources that were shared in the chat. And normally I would say safe travels this evening and watch out for deer, but instead I'll say safe virtual travels, and we'll hope to see you all again next year. Have a good evening. Thank you.